Survive the Horde is a limited time event mode where you and 3 other players must defend 3 of 10 possible objectives for 15 waves. If at any point all squad mates are down, you lose. You also lose if all 3 of your objectives are destroyed. You can get by with only one objective, but if all 3 of them are destroyed, you will lose. In this video, I hope to answer all questions you may have about Horde, and hope to help you get a run past the finish line if you find yourself struggling with this game mode. First things first, let's talk about a constructor. A constructor is practically mandatory for Horde, as having a base will help your structure survive a lot longer and provide general support to your team that will make your life a lot easier. For your lead commander, I would recommend having base Kyle, as he gives your structures a big increase in health, which will allow them to take more hits. And for support, I would recommend you have things like Power Base Kyle to provide some passive regeneration for your structures, which is really nice when you're busy dealing with smashers. Mega Base for the extra base range, which is really nice. Machinist Harper, who gives your traps extra durability, which is nice so that they don't break in the middle of the defense. And I would also throw in a Bomb Squad Kyle for the armor. He's honestly just there so that you can survive longer, but if you feel like you can do better by running someone else in that slot, you're more than welcome to do so. I would also recommend putting in Warden Kyle, as his ability allows your base to heal your allies, which is really nice so that they don't die and potentially lose you the game. For your team perk, you're probably going to want supercharged traps, as recycling isn't very useful in this mode, as you get more than enough resources to be able to build your defense. If you're going to run a second constructor, I would recommend having Ice King in the lead with Boom Base as your team perk. I recommend Boom Base because supercharged traps does not stack, so Boom Base is the only other team perk that would really do something for your team, as it gives you more damage and crit rate. Ice King in the lead allows your structures to freeze enemies when they touch it, which is really nice just for the crowd control and making things easier when you're getting bombarded. For your gadgets, there are only really 2 gadgets that I would recommend, and this applies for all heroes. Adrenaline Rush, so that you can multi-res when multiple of your teammates are down, which can make for really clutch plays. And then I would also recommend Slow Field, so that you can place it on the objectives when a bunch of your walls are broken, there are a bunch of hucks about to get in. It helps you keep control of the situation. The next loadout I would like to recommend is the Zenith loadout. Sub-Zero Zenith is really good, as he allows you to freeze enemies with sniper critical hits, which will make your life easier, as frozen enemies cannot move. So your team can better deal with threats, like a ton of smashers on top of your objective, or maybe there are a couple mini-bosses that need to get taken care of. You can put your Zenith on the smashers and just let your DPS take care of the rest. But Aura, I hear you say, the Xenon bow doesn't work. I can't hit shit. Whatever will I do? Well, my friend, I would like to introduce you to the Crankshot. The Crankshot is Zenith's best weapon. It fires fast and has a fast reload, and it lets you stick 2 crit rating perks on it. It is very efficient when it comes to freezing smashers, especially if you can get a good vantage point, as you can just have an entire view of the field and just freeze everything you see. I highly recommend that you don't stick on one smasher for long. Just tag it so that it gets frozen, and then let the Affliction take care of the rest, as Affliction can crit and it will freeze. Those are the 2 main heroes I want to talk about. The rest of the hero loadouts will feature their respective weapons, so that's why I want to talk about the weapons next. The first and obvious one is the Black Drum. As of recording this, the Black Drum is very broken. It is the best smasher killer in the game by far. Hell, you can even use it on Constructor and you will be perfectly fine. It is just that broken. But I wouldn't rely on it for long, as it's very possible the Black Drum gets patched in the future. The next weapon I want to talk about is the Nocturno. The Nocturno is very strong and it has a very strong loadout that you can use. It is probably going to be the best next thing next to the Black Drum. However, the Nocturno is only limited if you got the Ultimate Founders Edition, which is no longer sold and is very limited. I'm only mentioning it here for people that have it. If you want a showcase of this loadout, Beast has a video on it, and I would highly recommend if you watch that to get a grasp of what it does. I will also link his videos to some of the other weapons so that you can better understand how to use them. Other weapons that you could use for DPS include things like the ground pounder, pop shot, hush buster, those good shotguns that you can use. You could use the pot shot and the Jabberwocky. However, I wouldn't really recommend it as explosive ammo is a big premium in this mode and you cannot get the resources to craft it. So I wouldn't really recommend those. You could use Pharaoh with the vacuum tube bow, but honestly, I wouldn't really recommend it in the end game. She doesn't do that much damage. I'd honestly just use the second Zenith. The Scourge also could work, but like the other weapons, it just falls off when you get to the higher challenges. The Dirge Song also hits really hard, but when you use the Dirge Song, you will become a glass cannon. So it will be pretty easy for you to die, but you can try it out. So to summarize for hero loadouts, you should have at least one base. If it's going to be one base, you want base Kyle in the lead. If it's going to be two bases, base Kyle and Ice King. Have maybe one DPS, and then you want one Zenith. At the higher challenges, you probably will want to drop the additional DPS for the Zenith because the Black Drum carries Constructor so much. And if you don't have access to the Black Drum, your next best option will probably be the Discharger, nerfed it may be. When it comes to traps, you have a couple options. When it comes to ceiling traps, you only have two. Ceiling drop traps versus ceiling electric fields. Ceiling drop traps are really good at doing damage while you're staggering the enemy, while electric fields are just good for damage. I honestly prefer using the drop traps because the stalling that they provide with their damage is honestly far more valuable than just the raw damage from electric fields. It is so useful for wave 15 for just stalling normal enemies while you deal with the smashers, the mini bosses, and whatever else is being thrown your way. Electric fields honestly just fall off as you get higher and higher in the wave. They're good in lower power levels, but in 140 they just don't deal enough damage to help keep the Huskies and regular Husks under control. They can still be good for spawn trapping, but even then, drop traps still just provide better utility. If you're going to use electric fields, just use them to spawn trap. That's the most useful they will be. In terms of placement, you're going to want to place your ceiling electric fields 2 tiles high, and then you're going to want to place your ceiling drop trap 3 tiles high. At those heights, they'll be immune to getting destroyed by the hush spawning. And ceiling drop traps you want to have 3 tiles high because that'll be their maximum effectiveness, as you'll get more bounces from drop traps. For wall traps, you don't really have that many options because most of them aren't really that good in this particular environment. One wall trap that I can recommend, however, are the wall darts. Wall darts are really good primarily because you can attack from 3 tiles away. So they have good range and they have good damage, which pretty much makes them best by default. Now you may ask about broadsides, and honestly I would say they're not worth it. Broadsides are only really good in a 1x1 trap tunnel setting, and even those are really rare. But in Horde, they're especially bad because you're going to be dealing with exploding death bombs. So there's a very good chance those broadsides just get blown up by the sheer number of death bombs there are. I would also recommend that you craft wall spikes for your initial defense. As you've seen in the gameplay, the wall spikes really just help out your early waves, as it makes it harder for the hush to get through and just generally makes things easier in the easy waves. For floor traps, there's only really 2 options: tar pits and floor freeze. They're just really helpful in controlling the husk. Tar pits can stagger smashers, which is really nice if your Zenith is otherwise occupied or you just can't get to it in time. It just helps stop smashers from breaking your walls. Floor freeze are also just really good for general stagger on the regular husks and huskies, but they are very likely to get blown up in wave 15, so you would want to upgrade your floors before wave 15. I would highly recommend for your 6th perk on your trap to pick the perk that gives heals for your structures that are attached to the traps. It just helps your trap stay alive via passive healing. However, if you find yourself having low durability for your traps, I may just recommend that you put durability for that 6th perk instead. It mainly just depends on personal preference, so go with what you think will do best. I also haven't talked about anti-airs yet. You would like some anti-airs, especially on your roof. There are a lot of lobbers starting on wave 7, and they can easily destroy your roof. So I would very much recommend placing anti-airs on the top of your roof to help out with the lobbers. I usually place like 8 to 9 just to be safe. The first thing I want to talk about are the pillar waves that you encounter on waves 3, 9, and 12. These waves aren't really that big of a deal, as all you just need to do is destroy a bunch of pillars. You can easily achieve this with a melee of choice, preferably a physical melee. The Xenon bow does a good job of clearing these out. Hell, even a physical blackstone does a good job of dealing with these. They aren't really that difficult. You can just end them easy, but if you take too long to destroy the pillars, things could get ugly for you. Be wary of mini-bosses. These guys spawn on waves 6, 11, and 15 with 1, 2, and 3 respectively. These guys can be really tough to beat, so you want to get rid of them as soon as possible because they can destroy a lot of your defense and completely jeopardize your run. Your main objective for those waves are going to be dealing with the mini-bosses. The mini-bosses can spawn with any of the regular modifiers that you would usually see on them in any mission, so it's really hard to prepare you for all of them because that would take too long. I will point out 2 specific modifiers though, Building Blocker and Ricochet. Building Blocker makes it very hard for you to panic build when your structures get broken, which could make things very tricky if you don't have a slow field ready for incoming husks. And Ricochet, as you can kill yourself by shooting the mini-boss without you even noticing it because you did too much damage in one hit. It's a very easy way to lose your run, and it has happened to me before. Now let's get into what makes Horde really difficult. Wave 15. Wave 15 is by far the hardest wave, as it's the last wave, and you might be wondering why I've been talking about it so much when I was going over the loadouts and traps and all that stuff. Well, it's because Wave 15 is a 5-minute survival wave, to where you must survive for 5 minutes. Now, it doesn't seem so bad because, oh, I have a lot of drop traps. This will be easy. Well, I got news for you, Buster. Wave 15 throws a lot at you. What does it throw at you? It throws a shit ton of smashers, flingers, lobbers, and takers that like to touch you inappropriately. It also throws mini-bosses at you. And, to make this truly hell, there are 2 modifiers. You have Smokescreen, and then you have Exploding Death Bomb. How fun! Smokescreens make it to where when you kill husks, a smokescreen will spawn. And that's pretty obvious given the title of the modifier. Smokescreen decrease your ranged weapon damage by a pretty significant margin, so it just makes it harder for your ranged weapon to do things, and it's not worth using a melee. If you shoot a husk outside of the smokescreen, your ranged weapons will do their normal damage, so it's not too bad as long as you know how to play around it. Exploding death bombs, however, that's where the real hell is. Exploding death bombs spawn whenever you kill a husky, and sometimes you can get more than one. These things deal a fuck ton of damage. They also like to blow up your structures. There truly is no way to play around death bombs aside from just praying to God that none of your stuff gets blown up, which isn't a really good strategy. So that's why I recommend sealing drop traps, because they're 3 tiles high and they're going to be not affected by the death bombs because the death bombs can't reach that high. If you think you can get away with getting hit by 1 or 2 death bombs, think again, buddy. These things hurt a lot and they will kill you very, very fast. Don't believe me? Well, just take a look at this clip. Oh shit, I'm dead.
Base is broke.
If it comes down to it, just play the...
Oh shit! We failed!
Oh my god!
We failed!
So what ways can you play around all this shit that's getting thrown at you? Well, one way is to just stay on high ground. The death bombs can't touch you if you have the high ground. I also recommend that you have someone on flinger duty. Ideally, one of your constructors is keeping an eye on flingers and dealing with them. If your constructors can't go out to the spawns, which I understand is very dangerous, then have someone on the roof keeping an eye on it and dealing with the husk. You can also put a defender pad on the roof. Defenders will help keep the husk and huskies under control on the roof, as well as shooting down the things that get thrown by the flares. They're just really helpful in terms of Wave 15. It's not something you have to go out of your way to do unless you think it would really help your team. Your zenith should be freezing every smasher, flinger, and taker they can see. It is really important you keep the freeze uptime so that your DPSs can deal with them. Keeping everything frozen is just really helpful. It's also why I recommend having Ice King as a second constructor if you're going to run 2 constructors, because husk getting frozen when they touch the walls is really nice. You could also just place a bunch of walls everywhere, which would also slow the husk down because Ice King would be freezing them. It's just another way to stall the husks, really. The DPSs should be killing everything that gets frozen, or everything that isn't frozen. As long as smashers, flingers, and takers are dying, you're doing your job. The DPSs should also be focusing the mini-bosses when they spawn. Zenith won't really help out with the mini-bosses because mini-bosses cannot be frozen. So when the mini-bosses spawn, your main DPS should be dealing with the mini-boss, and your Zenith should still be freezing every smasher, flinger, and taker they can see. Other things that I can recommend is that you build connection points for your structures. For example, just connect your wall traps to your ceilings so that your ceilings don't fall down because you only had one connection point that was holding it all up. It's just generally a good practice so that your ceiling doesn't fall down. Other advice I could give is communicate with your teammates, especially on Wave 15. You want to be giving comms for what's going on in the objective, where the mini bosses are, if the mini bosses are dead. Just good comms help out a lot. Having good vibes is a godsend, because if you're playing with people you can't stand or someone just generally dragging the mood down, it's going to massively affect your run, especially if you're doing multiple runs in a row trying to get challenge 5. Good vibes just go a long way. You might ask what elements I want to have my weapons at, and I would recommend you have your weapons at physical, as there are only 3 elemental waves and they're all different elements. So I would just recommend having your weapons at a physical element, because physical weapons are strong against physical enemies, and wave 15 is a physical wave. And last but not least, we have the weekly modifiers. The first 2 weekly modifiers, Storm Surge and Low Gravity, they don't really change much. It's honestly not worth talking about. Week 3 is Melee Mayhem, and you might be thinking, oh no, I can't use my ranged weapons, whatever will I do? They just have Ricochet. So, the strategy that my friends and I developed when we did Melee Mayhem last year was we just kamikazed our way through the entire Horde, because melee weapons, even in Melee Mayhem, still suck ass. Week 4 is Hasty Husks. The husks move faster, they have Healing Death Burst, they have Frenzy Death Burst. They just become more of a nuisance to deal with, and it can honestly be pretty hard, but as long as you're keeping good comms and you just have good general practice, you should be able to get past it just fine. Week 5 is just the tornado modifier from the war games, if you've ever done those. The tornadoes don't really do much if you have a base. Running a second base isn't a bad idea, because having one base like closer to the ground and maybe having a base closer to your roof, it's just going to help your roof be more healthy as they get ravaged by the tornadoes. I especially recommend having healing attached, as I mentioned before, on all your traps, because the heals attached should be enough to deal with the residual damage from the tornadoes. Week 6 make husks drop acid pools when they die, and the husk's attacks also make you slower. Now, week 7 is when things get really, really hard. Unflappable Husks Challenge 5 is the hardest thing in Fortnite Save the World. The Unflappable Husks modifier makes it to where husks are immune to crowd control traps, like the ceiling drop traps, the floor freeze, and tar pits. So it's really hard to control the husks. You can still freeze husks with Zenith and Ice King as of this recording. This may be intended, this may not be intended, I don't know. But as I know right now, husks being able to be frozen by hero abilities are the norm. It is genuinely the hardest thing to do, and all I can really recommend is that you spam just a ton of electric fields, as your drop shots are basically going to be useless, and you're just going to want more damage. Week 8 is just that you have less time in between waves, which really isn't a modifier because you have more than enough time to get your defenses ready. It's not a modifier worth worrying about, in my opinion. Week 9 makes it to where husks don't show up on your minimap, which again isn't really a modifier worth worrying about because who uses their minimap to see where husks are? Week 10 is the floor is lava. When you're standing on the ground, if you stay on the ground long enough, you're gonna start getting damaged. It's not really something worth worrying about as long as you're moving and as long as you're jumping and staying on higher ground, which you should be doing. You should be fine. And last but not least is week 11. It's the Space Rocks modifier from Wargames. Same thing as I said with the Tornado. If you have 2 bases, you'll generally be fine because the healing should be good enough. I would also recommend crafting anti-airs very early on because anti-airs are enough to deal with the Space Rocks on their own. And that should about do it. I hope this video helps you get your Horde clears. If you liked the video, please like, comment, and subscribe on the shield thing. And I will take no more of your time. Goodbye.